Hi, welcome to Ted's Turning and my workshop. This is my friend Bob Edmondson, and what Bob's going to do to show you today is how you take pieces of scrap wood like this that you might get out of a builder's yard or a branch off your tree in the yard and make something beautiful out of it like this for gifts for the holidays for your family and friends.
Hi folks, Bob Edmondson here. Glad you could join us tonight. We're going to be doing a fun little project on Christmas trees. It's a multi-axis project that will at some point net us a little tree like this. You can do different designs, which we'll discuss a little bit later. I think you'll find it fun, so let's get started. All right folks, we're going to get started by just kind of going through the tools we'll be using this evening. Obviously safety glasses that we should be using. Oftentimes if I'm doing a limb from a tree or something and I don't really know how well it's going to hold together, I'll use my face shield as well. But for our purposes tonight, I'll be wearing the safety glasses. I'm going to be using a variety of tools tonight. All of you will have had these. I've got a couple parting tools that we'll be using. Actually 4 of them for just various things, which I'll get into the actual functionality of each of these as we start to turn. I like doing my shaping with a skew. There's a lot of ways that you can do it. You can use a spindle gouge, you can use the carbide tools. I kind of cut my teeth on using a skew, so that's why I favor them. I've got 2 different styles. I've got one with a rounded nose that I use for the general shaping, and then when we get into the branch layout, I'll be using a squared off piece that you can see. And I'll show you these more when we get to the lathe. For the ornamentation that'll be going on, I use a 40/40 gouge just for general shaping, and then a kind of a specialty spindle gouge that I use for being able to get in there and do some fine work. So we'll take a look at all of those. For holding the material tonight, I'm using step centers, a revolving step center on the tailstock obviously, and I'll show you a little bit more why I use those in a moment. And then I do enough of these that I've created story sticks. And I generally do 4 different sizes of these. Tonight we're going to be doing like a 10-inch tree, but you can see some of the others here that are roughly 8 inches. I just like having a quick and easy reference that I can lay these things out and not spend a lot of time working on that. So, all right, let's speak about wood for just a moment. This is a project that you can use multiple billets for turning these things. You can go to the store and buy yourself a nice piece of hardwood for $4 or $5. You can also go over to the big box store and get a 2x4, rip it, and you'll have yourself some really inexpensive billets that you can use. Where I live, they're doing a lot of building and whatnot. When they get to the closets, they put in these nice poplar rods. I've found quite a few of those just thrown in the trash. Pick them up, make a great little blank. And then best of all, if you've got trees in your yard or take a walk in the park, just pick up some of these pieces. You'll be able to find a lot of different material that you can use. For these trees, I find that a minimum of 1.5 inches is where you're trying to get. You can get larger because you can do any kind of a layout you want, but if you get below the 1.5 inches, you're going to have troubles when you do your layout, which we'll go over in just a moment. As far as lengths are concerned, I mentioned with the story stick, I do different sizes. The larger ones are going to be 10-inch finished, so we'll use about a 12-inch billet to get started with those. It's about 2 inches that you want to leave yourself to work with so that you can have plenty of room to work at the tailstock and the headstock. So, all right, with that, I think we'll move over to the lathe and start laying things out. All right, before we get started doing the actual turning, we've got to consider our layout for the multi-axis that we're going to be doing later on. This is basically the layout that we're going to be using. There's going to be 3 points about 120 degrees apart. Doesn't have to be exact. You can eyeball it. I eyeball it all the time. And we're going to put an inner circle here which will be used to move the step center away from the center. This distance is usually 3/16 to about 5/16 of an inch. All you're trying to do is keep the step center, when you position it, right at the edge or a little away from the edge so that you get a good grip on it. So that's the reason that we're kind of measuring these things out. So I've already laid this out. We can now put it between centers. We're going to be turning initially on centers, and then we'll come back to the multi-axis section a little bit later on. So we'll move on now to doing some of the tree laying. Okay, if you are going to be using wood that you found in the yard, like this branch here, or if you've taken 2x4s and cut them, rip them into two pieces, you're going to have to rough these out and get them round. I usually lay them out when they're square, just so I have a target for what I'm going to do. But since we've got this nice poplar pole that we found, we're going to use this for our layout in our project today. So the next part of this process is going to be to lay out the tree. And I use these little story sticks that I make up. I make enough of these. I've made, I think, 4 different story sticks with different sizes. The one we're going to do today, the blank's about 12 inches. The tree's going to end up approximately 10. Any of these, if you're going to make an 8-inch tree, you use a 10-inch blank. So you're giving yourself about 2 inches of wiggle room on either end. So I'm going to lay this out right now for the 10-inch tree, and then we'll do some initial shaping and get started here. So basically, I'm going to go and give myself some waste down here, leave myself a little bit of room for the ornament here. This section will be the tree. The trunk is down here, and then I'm going to have a base right there, and then I've got more waste down here. So I'm just going to turn the lathe on here and mark these. All right, we've got our layout lines here. I'm going to start doing just some basic layout with the parting tools that I've got here, and then we'll roll right into the shaping of this. When I begin shaping, I'm going to start at the upper portion. This is the top of the tree. It's going to be conical, and I'm going to be coming down this direction. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to leave a little bit of meat here for our ornament. I'll take something off there. Come back, we'll work on the trunk, the base, and just keep going here. So with that, let's get started. I usually start just with an 1/8-inch parting tool just to get some cuts in here so I don't lose them when I start using bigger tools. I will use another parting tool to divine some of this, and right now I'm going to do the top of the tree and where the ornament's going to be. We'll just take a little bit of wood off here. Just trying to define the base of the tree, and then I'm going to start working with the skew to do the basic shaping of the tree up in here. Okay, we've got the basic shape of the tree in here. I'm going to do a little bit more work here. It's got a little bump in here, but I typically try to put a little flare down here. It would make it look like a tree. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come down here and shape out the trunk. What I'm trying to do here is get a little bit of a taper here, like you'd normally see a tree trunk where it's fatter at the bottom and gets skinnier as it goes up. I'm just trying to give it a little bit of reality here. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit more off of here real quick.
I'm going to give the base a little bit of a shake now.
Switching over to a gouge for just basic shaping here. All right, I'm going to hit this with a little bit of sandpaper just to clean this up, and then we're going to come back and do our branch layouts in just a moment. All right, we got the basic shape done, and now it's time to lay out where our branch locations are going to be. And just for an example, remember that we've got 3 axes. We're going to start doing our multi-axis piece now. And I've marked these out as black as A, blue as B, C as red, just to identify them. What we're going to be doing is putting lines on our blank here. I generally use 3/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, something like that. You can experiment around with it a little bit and see what you like. The main thing is that the lines should be fairly consistent as you lay them out. If you get them like, you know, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch back to 1/4 inch, it's going to look real funny. So try to keep them consistent. Doesn't matter how many there are, it's just a matter of preference. But using that 1/4 inch on a blank this size is what I found generally looks the best. So looking at this, the layout, the lines, we're going to start with, when we're doing the multi-axis cutting in a moment, we're going to start with the black axis, and when we cut, we're going to cut this first line, and then we're going to go 1, 2, and cut again. 1, 2, cut, 1, 2, cut. So you're basically cutting every 3rd line, and you're going to go all the way up to the top until there are no more lines. When we start the B axis, we're going to start on the 2nd line here, and we're going to do the same process. We're going to go 1, 2, cut, 1, 2, cut, 1, 2, cut, all the way up to the top until there are no more lines for us to cut there. And then we'll move on to the red axis, and that layout begins on the 3rd line, and same process, 1, 2, cut, 1, 2, cut, 1, 2, cut, all the way up to the top till you're finished. you may be wondering why we do this 3 times. It's because we've got 3 axes. If we went to a multi-axis of 4, where we were doing every 90 degrees, we'd add another series of branches in here and go to a 4th grouping. So it always corresponds to the number of axes that you're working on. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I just use that as a starting point. Mark that one, and we're going to go walk this up, get this laid out, and then we'll start the cutting process. And again, you can just eyeball this. It doesn't have to be measured out. Your eyes are pretty good at figuring out if it's right or wrong. All right, now that we've got the lines laid out, we're going to go through the process of making a V-cut into each of these lines. We're going to start, as I mentioned, with the A-axis, which will be this first line, and then we'll just march up here. I'm using a little bit different skew this time. This one is squared off. It's just easier, I find, to do this kind of a cut. What I'm going to be doing is taking the point down, and we're going to be rocking it forward till we catch that first line, and we're going to come down to about the halfway point on the turn, and then we're going to remove the skew, and then we're going to come back and we're going to make that V cut from the bottom. We'll start here and we'll roll into that until we catch that line where we just cut, and that'll give us a nice nice place that will define the first branch, and then we'll do all of them up the way there. So let me get this onto the A-axis here. Check and make sure we're not going to hit anything. I think we're okay there. And we're going to be... Oh, and let me mention something here too. When you're making these cuts down the way, you're going to come in, as I mentioned, start your cut, come down about halfway on the blank that's turning. When you get up into this area, since you're going from the multi-axis being off-center here, when you get down to this end of the blank, you're more on center. So this is turning. You can kind of see it a lot. It has a lot less motion to it. So when you start to make that cut and come into here, you're just going to go down a little bit, because if you go all the way down halfway, you're going to end up making a V cut all the way around that piece there. So, okay, let's, whoops, bring this down a little bit. I'm going to try this at right around 1,000 RPMs. You'll have to play with it. You just don't want stuff bouncing around. All right, first cut. Come down here slowly. Bring it back up. I'm going to roll that back into that cut. Then remove it. And what you end up with is this V cut here. And then we're trying to get a nice clean cut. And we're going to walk this all the way up. So let me go on and start with the next one, which will be right here. One, two, three, next cut. One, two, three. Take a look, see how we're doing here. I'll mention this now. As you start working up there, you can get lost, so you may find yourself having to stop every once in a while and reorient which line you're going to be on. If you happen to miscut, in other words, let's say if I did this cut first and then missed this one but did it here, you're not really going to know. You'll just pick it up, just correct yourself on your position in here and move on. You're going to be the only one that really knows what happened there. So let's go on Pick this one up. Okay, cuts are pretty clean, that's good. That's what you're looking for, is basically a clean cut in here. It just makes it easier to paint when we get to the painting stage. I want to get a little closer here. Where are we? 1, 2, 3, so we're gonna start here. Here I'm not gonna go quite as far in. And you can see, I barely went in there and I'm almost halfway around. So you can kind of tell what happens when you go too far in. It's very easy to make a V all the way through there. So, all right, we've got our A axis branches cut. We're gonna come back, go to the B. All right, we've changed over to the B axis and we've started doing our cuts. So we're gonna just work our way up like we did before. 1, 2, 3. All right, we're gonna move over to the C axis now. Okay, C axis will be here. We'll start with the third line. Same process. 2, 3. The last one there. So at this point, we're done with the branch layouts. We're going to come back and do a little bit of work up here, and then we're going to seal this up and we can move on to some painting. All right, we are now at the point where we're going to make a mess and put paint on our tree. I say that because what we're going to be doing is trying to get the paint into these nice little grooves that we did, but in reality you're going to get it all over the place on the outside, but we can take care of that a little bit later on. You can use any kind of paint you want. I think this is just a Michaels cheap paint that I picked up somewhere. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. You just want the color that you want. I've done greens and reds. Typically works out pretty well, but you can experiment and see what you like for yourself. Or maybe you get a special request or something. Certainly can do it. So I just squeeze a little paint out onto the my little palette here that I make out of a plastic plate. Get some on the brush, and then we're just going to go in to each one of these grooves and get a good layer of paint in there. I didn't mention that this was sealed. I use a 50-50 blend of denatured alcohol and shellac. It just goes on very easily, dries fast, and it serves the purpose. What I'm trying to do is when I get to the point where I'm going to use the skew to skim off this paint, the paint won't have penetrated into the wood, so it'll come off and it'll give a really nice clean look. That's the reason for sealing it up. You also might have noticed that I didn't do any sanding on this. It's kind of a waste of time at this juncture, simply because you're going to use that skew to come back and clean things up. So it's just kind of like, you know, a belt and suspenders. You're doing the same thing twice, so you might save yourself some time by not having to do that. So I'm just slopping on some paint here, try to get it nicely covered in those grooves, and then we'll let it dry and we'll come back to skim these off. Okay. All right, we've got the paint is dry, and as you can see, we've made a mess. I've made a mess. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the skew and we're going to just take a skim coat right down here, and this will clean up really nice. We'll get the pencil marks off and everything on there. It'll leave it a nice finish on there. So let's get this cranked up. Okay, I think we got it. So you can see how doing that skew takes all that paint off. Again, as I mentioned a moment ago, if you are a little bit more careful than I was, it'll make that job a lot easier. You won't have to make as many passes on this. So, okay, we are done with the branch layout and the painting and getting it cleaned up, and now we're going to all right, we're going to work on the ornament up at the top here. I generally don't have a major plan. I just start working on it, and what evolves is what happens. I'm thinking here maybe some kind of a little crown here, and then maybe a little finial or something up there. We'll just see what happens here. Anyway, I'm going to be using a finial gouge. You can see here. This is like what Cindy Drozda uses. It's got a 40-degree tip on it, and it's got a 15-degree side on here. So it's I can get really into these areas very nicely without catching the wood and whatnot, or at least that's the plan. So I find this a very useful tool for doing the small work up here, finials and things like that. So. All right, with that, we'll get started. All right, I think we'll quit there. All we've got to do now is we're going to deal with parting this off in a little bit. I want to do some work at the base, and then I'm going to put it in a chuck. We'll finish this off. Okay, we're going to finish up now by doing a little bit of undercutting at the base here, or at the bottom of the tree, and then I'm going to do a little undercutting here at the base, and then we'll get rid of some of this wood and get this thing off the lathe, and we'll be pretty well finished. So So we'll take that little nub off, just take a chisel and knock that off. Probably we'll do the same up here, a knife or a chisel. We could probably get that off pretty easily. But basically that's the tree. We'll put a little bit of a finish on it. I typically use this Krylon matte finish. It's, let's see if we get it in here. It's that 1311 Krylon matte finish. This doesn't get handled too much, but it makes just a good, clean, quick finish for your all right, just going to get this piece off on the top here, just using a skew just to kind of loosen it up a little bit. And when we get there, it should come right off. Yep, there we go. So we've got that. I'll take a little sandpaper and just kind of clean that up right there, but that will pretty well complete this. Let's get this little nub off down here. And trying to find you. There we are. Finished tree. Okay, folks, we've completed our project. Turned out pretty well. Nice little Christmas tree that you can use around the house for the holidays or give away as gifts. Anything you really like to do. The fun part about these is that there's a lot of options for you when you start turning them. You can change the design work on the actual tree itself. You can maneuver the branch locations by moving the lines around. The tops are always fun because if you're like me, I start these things and I never quite know where I'm going until I get into it, and something just kind of evolves like this one did here. But just to show you some examples of other ones. Here's a couple smaller ones that were done. You can see a different ornament on top. This one larger. You can also paint them, little gold iridescent paint. So you've got a lot of different things that you can do there. Here's some examples of trees made from branches that came out of the yard. It still has the bark on it, so you can kind of get an idea of what that look is going to be. And they all turn out differently. This one, I had bark all the way up here, but it blew up on me, so I just kept going to see what would happen, and that's what occurred. So again, a lot of different design elements here that you can play around with. If you like, you can go into some of the larger pieces of wood. These I did, I think these were 2.5 or 3 inch to start off with. You can play with the color. Here was one in red, another one in green. Again, changing up the ornament up at the top, making it however you want. And then this one I did a few days ago. What I did with this one is actually it's a 4-axis, and I actually kind of like it. It's a little bit different. So you'd have a axis at every 90 degrees. It just gives you more branch locations as you do it. The other thing I did with this is I turned a design up at the top and then sanded it flat, making it into a little angel, added a brass halo. So these are just things that you can do. You can do all kinds of things. You just need let your imagination run wild. It's kind of fun. So I might like to mention that this idea with these trees is not original. It came from an article that was in the 2008 AEW magazine, and it's a fellow by the name of David Reed Smith. The article is called Eccentric Tree. And if you're interested, all the instructions and how he does it are in this article. It's kind of a fun read. This fellow, the website, he's very ingenious with jigs and things that he makes and whatnot. So if you get a chance, you might want to go look at his website and see what else he has to offer. But this was the inspiration for the article. So I hope everyone will try these. They're a lot of fun. As I mentioned, lots of options. So Go turn.